something very interesting about women and our relationship with anger and our relationship within different cultures within anger and personal expression of that. So this is a poem with that Cypriot part of me and that British part of me perhaps wrestling between how we express anger and how we are told to be good girls. It's called White Lies. White lies. There was something intoxicating about her rage, fighting like a bull with men waving their red flags. She saw each one and fumed at the sight. She knew what they were here for, these toxic clay in human jars. She would not dispose of them safely, but smash the glass ceiling as they fitted it over her head, difficult. They called her, I call her, magnificently irrepressible. My name is Freya Blyth. I am a Cypriot British writer and poet living in Aberystwyth in Wales for the last decade now. My work and writing tends to explore themes of feminism and female spirituality, as well as looking at historical figures and writing and looking at new, fresh perspectives of how we can view women. I have come from an actress, librarian background and then started an independent bookshop in Wales, which is now winning awards such as the Welsh Bookshop of the Year, and we were shortlisted for this year, 2024. Also Rising Star Award in the bookselling industry. That's wonderful, and I founded Aberystwyth Poetry Festival. So I'm incredibly passionate about looking at those community links and how to bring more of the creativity and creatives to rural areas in Wales. And it's lovely to kind of see that kind of blossoming and how that both inspires my own work and that interconnection between writers, but also inspiring the next generation as well. This is a poem called Esther, which is inspired by the book of Esther in the Bible, and specifically looking at the moment, all we see is a line in the Bible that says that the king sent out for the young, beautiful virgins of the land. But this is looking at a moment that comes after that, a moment that isn't represented, but the moment when she is taken, and how this kind of correlates with kind of a modern audience looking at sex trafficking and things that still very much happen in this day. Esther. I walk the dusty road to watery salvation when they find me. My urn held high upon my head, my neck arch from the weight, forcing the eyes and the head high. As the king's men rode up, thick terracotta colour fills the air like flour during bread making. The hooves of the horses pound the floor as if they were kneading dough. They came for the taxes, and now they come for me, men trained to kill, not farm, to own, to slay the land, not tend to it. Barking orders in a tongue I don't know, they cut out our tongues for speaking back. My throat fills with dust. Hot sands of the day cutting my voice. I can't bow without spilling water so scant in our desert village. They said it made me look regal. As if I am so proud I would not bow. All I felt was the ache in my back, shivering up my spine. They took me that day. No time to waste. Goodbye, Anya, Eliana, Shira. No time wasted collecting water or cooking for Abba. No time wasted taking me to the king's bed. I gather water as they find me, take me, rode me, all the way to the king's bed. I started exploring writing through identity, really. I was living in the north of England, born and brought up there, but have Cypriot heritage as well. And so looking at how we identify in the world and how we choose to present ourselves was a topic that was really interesting to me. And then coming to Wales as well and becoming a writer based on this environment and the nature that surrounds us and the questions that that brings up, and as a woman as well, was really really interesting. So looking at the vulnerabilities through those threads was really fascinating to me. Also, having dealt with chronic health my whole life, and recently being diagnosed in the last couple of years as ADHD and dyslexic, kind of bringing in these different elements of identity and kind of unwrapping those within my writing has been really interesting. And most recently finishing a master's degree at Aberystwyth University, focusing in that poetic element of identity has been really beautiful to unpack, and that's where I'd like my creative practice to continue to unfold in as well. Is a poem that came out of a very authentic moment of grief and looking at those personal, intimate moments and experiences that help us to connect with each other as humans. It's called Grief is a Thing That Creeps. Grief is a thing that creeps. It's sitting in her rocking chair with a Matisse scarf still thrown over the back, painted bright with her favourite watercolour lilies in lilacs and warm sunshine. It is lying in wait in her bone china teacup, with the rim so thin I can almost see the edge of her peony lipstick stains. It is crouching in the bathroom that still smells like soft powders from years before I knew her. Grief is placed on the shelf neatly next to the empty pill bottles now crowding the space where her perfume used to go. Her toothbrush still frayed in the holder, standing next to his like a couple on a wedding cake topper, pink and blue, hers dry, his still damp from this morning. I would love to be touring with my current collection that I've been working on for the last few years, which focuses around biblical women and retelling their stories, looking at historical research, looking at theological research, and then amalgamating those together. And almost from my acting, I sort of write dramatic monologues and bring all of that information together, trying to embody those women, not just as the either villains, such as Potiphar's wife or Lot's wife, and not just as the kind of Mary and the kind of sacrificial women that we've seen, but as whole, full beings. And then I like to whittle that down and kind of bring poetry that holds the kernel of that truth and that vulnerability of the women within that. And so trying to wrestle a little bit sometimes with my dyslexia, but trying to find the right words that makes that emotive to a modern audience as well. And that's really interesting. So what I hope to be doing is to have published that first collection and then be touring with that and really connecting and inspiring young women, and specifically young brown women, with these voices of these women in our past histories. I think it's really important to be reclaiming these women's stories through history while also linking them with our own and our own history and what this means to us, and kind of drawing those parallels throughout other people's writings. So for example, also looking at Dorothy Wordsworth, who grew up in the Lake District, very close to where I did, and kind of decentralising her work and bringing it back down to kind of bring that path down to how it affects me as a modern writer as well. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to, in the next part, also hopefully publishing a second collection and pamphlet looking at Shakespearean women, which I'm focusing on in my current writing practice. So I think it's really exciting to see how this work is going to be affecting communities, both in my bookshop, the Aberystwyth Poetry Festival, Wales as a whole, and hopefully beyond that as well. I'm really interested in interdisciplinary, so I'm looking at working on developing things like the biblical poetry that I've written, and looking specifically from a poem that was written about Eve and that moment in which she realised that she had transcended what was allowed as a woman and what knowledge was okay for her to have. And I started working on this process with other actors in London and creating and formulating a play from that. So I'd really like to, if I was to think big ambition and big picture kind of work on writing plays as well, still with that poetry voice and that very intentional use of language and exploratory use of language, but also perhaps expand into short fiction and into fiction in general. But I think creative non-fiction as well, looking at how we can inspire women with the stories that we're doing and kind of take hold of these what we embody in this new generation, in both drawing our identity from our ancestors and from our past, but also having the strength and the confidence, having been brought up in this culture with all of the blessings that are attached to that, and being able to move with this empowerment that we now have. It's a great honour, and I'd love to explore that more into my writing as well. So this poem I wrote based on my experience of chronic health, which can sometimes be quite a challenge to write about because it's a painful subject, but also something that is so deeply personal and needs to come from a very authentic place. So this was a poem I wrote about that juxtaposition between sometimes what I've been feeling and experiencing internally based on what everybody else is seeing and potentially projecting through things like social media. My roaring 20s. Sometimes the breaths feel so laboured, in, out, in again. I feel as though it takes my lungs more effort than I woke up with today to keep dragging the air inside my body. How can I possibly have the space within myself when crowded self-doubt and fear already huddle, occupying the corners of my mind, forming treaties and illegal squatting rights? My limbs move like they're weighted, suffocating under the constant consumption of every media outlet screaming at me, this is the best time of my life.